This is Duncan MacPherson with Pareto Systems. Welcome to the Always On podcast, where we are constantly providing insights to top fee-for-service professionals so they can continually work on themselves personally and professionally and work on their business. And to that end, I'm very excited in this 50th episode of Always On to be joined with Chris Jeppesen, who heads up the practice management department at First Trust. He's a good friend. He's an exceptional pickleball player and golfer and ping pong player. And he co-authored the Advisor Playbook with me and, of course, the Blue Square Method. And in today's conversation, we talked about some timely and innovative best practices that financial professionals are adopting, but also some of the timeless, especially as they relate to your fee worthiness. So hopefully you like this conversation. And if you do, please share it with others. If you have any questions or ideas about themes in the future, please let us know. And thanks once again for tuning into the 50th episode of the Always On podcast. Make it a great day. So a couple of years ago, obviously the world got disrupted and I couldn't get on airplanes. So I decided, well, to fill that gap, we do podcasts because we were still interacting and consulting with top fee-for-service professionals. And most importantly, we were seeing how they adapted to that disruption. And as you'd expect, our first guest on the Always On podcast was Chris Jeppesen, who is an absolute legend in the world of practice management and client acquisition in the financial services space. He heads up the advisory practices team at First Trust. He's been just an unwavering supporter of Pareto Systems. And here we are. It's episode 50 of Always On. So it made sense that we'd bring Chris back to talk about some of the timely and some of the timeless aspects of business development in the financial services space. So Chris, thanks for making some time. How are you doing?
I am, first of all, humbled that I would be considered as the 50th guest. If the first one didn't go that great, let's just wait till the 50th and then bring him back. That's a good idea. No, we're excited to be here. It's always great. I mean, we could almost do a podcast every time we talk because it's just us just sharing the experiences that we have. Oh, you got to hear this coaching call, or you wouldn't believe this conversation that I had. And it just reminds me of, and that's why the Advisor Playbook and Blue Square Method just kind of evolved out of all of these experiences that we just couldn't keep to ourselves. We had to share with others. And so I think we'll have a little bit more of that today on this podcast. And as always, I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, likewise. And it's funny. One of the most common questions I get is, what is the difference between the Blue Square Method and the Advisor Playbook? And I generally say it's about 7 years. Okay, so you and I worked on the Advisor Playbook. And again, it was almost completely virtual. We'd talk on the phone just before flights or over the weekends and just sharing those stories. And the Advisor Playbook was very well received, came out in 2015. And then pretty much right away, we got to work on the Blue Square Method and then just kept working on that. We were hoping to maybe let it see the light of day in March of 2020, but we thought, maybe we'll wait and see how this all plays out. And that gave us, again, another window into how nimble the best in this business are. And it probably added 30 pages to the book. But again, it continues. I was saying to you just prior to going live here that I got introduced to an advisor by a key team member at First Trust. And we had this great conversation. We were talking about scaling up. We were talking about continuity and succession. And I said to him, have you read the Blue Square Method? And he reached over and pulled out his copy and said, I've read it 3 times. And I thought, oh my goodness, I mean, classic. The people who like it the most need it the least, because this was an advisor at the pinnacle of achievement, but he just knows there's more there. But here's where it got interesting. As much of the consultation was emphasizing the qualitative, not just the quantitative, so the meaningful and the measurable. And I'm curious, is that what you're seeing too? Is that advisors are opening up panoramically about what they're trying to achieve?
There's no doubt. And just to touch on, it's funny, those that want it the most need it the least. That I just had another one of those situations. It's interesting, those that are also just hungry for ideas, best practices, maybe something that they're missing, are always the top performers. And it's like, listen, you're the one I'm learning from. You don't need to learn anything from me. I need to know what you're doing. So I just love that characteristic of top teams. The qualitative versus quantitative. We were just in Naples at a First Trust due diligence meeting just a couple weeks back. Maybe it's just a week ago. Been a lot of places the last couple weeks, but we're sitting in the beach in the background. Beautiful destination, the whole deal. And he said, "Can you meet before the meeting?" And I said, "Sure." And we had a really interesting conversation. I'm having more and more of these, and I don't know if it's just because I'm older or the sheer fact that 37% of advisors today manage 40% of the assets. Those 37% of advisors are all retiring in the next 10 years. So 40% of the assets that are managed today will have a key relationship manager retire in the next 10 years. And so I'm just running against and running into more and more of these folks that just kind of, what's next? Is this what it's about? And this particular advisor had made the decision to retire, but before he did, he says, "I want to focus on growing down and working with larger prospects." He said in the last 3 years, he brought in 300 million in assets. He goes, "I don't know that I want to retire now, but I already told all the rest of the team that I was, but I've never been more successful at relating to these clients that are well off and looking for that next phase in their life." And so I'm having more of those conversations of, we're doing this not because we have to do it anymore. It's actually dawning on people that they're doing it because they want to be doing it. We had a conversation. It's a great book. I can't remember where I read it, but they were talking about retirement and activity. And so when we play golf, we see it as an activity, right? People retire, they want to do this activity. It's their passion. When they have time off, they golf. But if you were to ask Brooks Koepka, what do you do with your time off? Well, it's not golf. See, that's work. And it's just the mindset of, they're both activities. One sees it as work. The other one sees it as an activity. These advisors are getting to the point that, you know what? It's actually not work. We thought it was work all the way up until the time we wanted to retire. Now we're realizing it's an activity that we enjoy, that we have a passion with helping others and being that Sherpa that we often use as an analogy to guide people from the precipice, right? From the peak, now guiding them back down is where they're finding incredible fulfillment. And I am too, and I know you are, just having those conversations with them. So it's the next 10 years is a very exciting time for a lot of different reasons, but not the least of which, just the sheer amount of assets that'll be in motion.
Well, that stat is incredible. I don't think I've heard it structured that way, but that really makes you think about the significance, the scope of that. That is significant. I want to back up for a second because, and I'm sure you've got me beat on this, but now that I'm rolling again, I think I've been in 68 cities in the last 17 months. And some of my best consultations have been on the way to or from the airport or waiting because of a delayed flight, where you just call an audible and bring somebody on the phone. And you're like, "I've got an extra 2 hours here. Let's talk." And it is incredible. You're right. I mean, the two-way street involved there, because I get as much out of those conversations as they do, because they let me put my finger on the pulse, what they're thinking, what they're doing. And you're right. their magnets are so powerful right now because they've shifted from the job to the calling. They're so attractive. This advisor I was speaking to last week, he's going through a very methodical continuity and succession plan with his team. And he's already seeing the impact that he addressing his own continuity and succession plan makes him more relevant to clients who've been kicking that can down the road themselves. Like he can lean on them respectfully and say, look, this is what I'm doing. And clients are responding. But what's interesting is the rejuvenation that comes out of that exercise, whether they're scaling up or growing down or continuity and succession, is they're getting very focused on their own strategic plan. And one advisor, we were going into this, and he pulled out his mind map. And I don't know if you've been involved in this, but I love the concept of mind mapping, just getting it out of your head and just letting it free form and come together. But what's amazing is at the core of every mind map I've seen is a very profound why. And the why is way less about income and way more emphasizing the outcome. Who am I? Who do I want to become? And then just reverse engineering out of that and populating on the mind map all the things that will contribute to that outcome and that why. And so that's what I'd like to talk about now. And I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
Well, I was just thinking about Tom Brady and Michael Jordan, is how different their games were from when they entered the league, right? Versus the way that they are at the end of their careers. They're such better players. And it looks so much more effortless. They just understood the game. They understood every different role that each person was playing. But I think also that their mindset was at a place where they were kind of at peace with who they were and not trying to prove anything. And it just describes every multi-million-dollar producer that's approaching what most would say, hey, it's time to be thinking about the next phase. They're like, what do you mean next phase? I'm in a groove, right? I've got this, I'm incredibly value add right now for each one of these relationships. So I just think about those advisors, right, that are approaching that stage of just enlightened as to the why, right? They have an answer to what that is, and it took all those years to get there. And that's why you see, man, it took 3 years to bring in 20 million in assets. Now they do it monthly. And what changed? It wasn't that the money wasn't always there. They changed.
Well, what's fascinating about what you said about being at peace, and this probably applies to every field of endeavor, is as you shift from knowledge to wisdom and that experiential learning, athletes especially talk about how things seem to slow down around them, and they don't press, they don't force it, they let things come together, they don't overreact, and their outcomes are, they do seem more effortless. Now, on the premise of mind mapping, just so everybody has some context, what a mind map looks like is it's the bullseye, the blue square, if you will, is the why. That's what we're trying to accomplish. And then around it is the what. Okay, so what are we actually trying to accomplish? Maybe measurably, the who's on our bench, who's our ideal client, who are we going to expand our strategic partnerships with, when, or timelines, and then of course how. What's the fuel? Marketing, business development, and things like that. But just getting it out of your head and just letting it form and come together, and not having a sort of a timeline to it. It could be a month or two for this to come together. Some have said that they've been working on their mind map's been sitting on their desk for a couple of years. And it's kind of an element of when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So it's a great exercise. It lines up with what we talk about in the Blue Square Method around W5, that exercise of goal setting. But now, Chris, I want to make a connection here, because we started working on the Blue Square method in 2015. We got into this concept of Kaizen and the Ikigai. You brought to my attention the whole concept of Kintsugi, which is quite incredible. In fact, I don't know if you've heard, there's a book, I was just given it by a client, called Life is Messy. And there's an emphasis on the Kintsugi, which is that art of repairing broken pottery with a formulation of gold dust. And the finished product is better than the original. It's more attractive, it's more compelling, it's more valuable, which says a lot about people who work on their business. But all of this has led us to the Blue Zone, which is this series on Netflix that's talking about longevity. So back to your point about people that are starting to think about the bigger picture, starting to think about things that are really important to them qualitatively. The Blue Zone, coincidentally, the first episode was set in Okinawa, and it centers around the Ikigai, which is our reason for being. So I guess my question, Chris, is have your conversations with advisors really gone deeper into their reason for being, the calling, the sense of purpose, what's important, that sort of thing?
I do. And I don't know if it was because so much that it was, and it could be, we could probably guess all day on the reason why it's happening. I do think COVID had a lot to do with that, just that whole rethinking what life is about and where the meaning is. Ikigai is just that fantastic word to capture our reason for existing. The other thing that I love about in these Blue Zone areas is that even the word retirement, there's not a direct translation in Japanese, that they're confused at the concept that you would choose to no longer pursue what it is that brings meaning to your life. Like, why would we not do that till the day we die, right? And to just clarify on the Blue Zones, in the United States, the average life expectancy is 77 years, right? The Blue Zone is where the life expectancy is 100. And that's a significant difference. And there's a lot where people point to diet, but I think there's a lot more to the fact that they have found, discovered, and are rewarded by identifying where they contribute and where they bring value. And so, yes, we're having more of those conversations, just as the average age of the advisor, talk about the average age of the advisor, that only 6% of CFPs are under the age of 30. I mean, there's not a whole lot coming up, that younger generation to take in. And I think that there's also a responsibility. I think that a number of advisors are feeling like, I want to make sure that these clients are taken care of. As much as I would love to do that extra vacation, there's more meaning in providing for that second and third generation. So absolutely is the answer.
It's interesting. The last chapter in the Blue Square method, called The Torch, talks about the mentor-protege dynamic. And many very effective, enlightened people had a mentor, and which meant they had to be a protege. They had to be shapeable and have humility to accept that input. But they often make the best mentors, those proteges. And more advisors are talking about how, one last week was talking about how he volunteers to teach entrepreneurship at a college. And he talks about how, there's a lot of things I could not learn in a simulator. I had to get out there and burn my finger on the stove and make mistakes to develop that situational awareness. And he says the students are just dumbfounded that he would put as much emphasis on experiential as formal education, because I think a lot of them have been told that, focus on your formal education. So that's a very interesting dynamic. You talk about longevity in the centenarians. I mean, there's a qualitative and quantitative driver to that. If somebody is going to live to be 100, they better have their money, in order, because they don't want to outlive that. But then, of course, what's going to give them meaning? And it's not just good genetics and good health and good diet. There's got to be that sense of purpose that's in place. And here's what's interesting to me. More and more financial professionals in the last couple of years have really, more of them have opened up to me and bared their soul to me about what keeps them up at night, and what their clients are opening up and telling them about what keeps them up at night. And what keeps them up at night is rarely, will I have enough? It's more about grief that they're coping with, anxiety, uncertainty.
And the illness of a loved one. I mean, I'm hearing more and more of that. Just how do I relate with that client? And it's going to happen, a third of every single client over their lifetime will be touched by cancer. You got by the age of 55, half of people will have a chronic illness they'll have to deal with, half. And so you play an integral role in that. And I was recently talking to somebody who had said that they had gone through this event with one of their parents, and they were finding themselves spending more and more time trying to take care of that particular parent. And they were asked, has your advisor reached out to you? And they said, no, my accountant did. I'm like, wow, did personalization get replaced by the accountant? I mean, that really says a lot. So what type of conversation, what does that family phone call script consist of? Giving people the direction and dialogue so that it doesn't come off as trying to dig into someone's personal life that isn't relevant to their financial, being able to draw that bridge so that they understand where the questions are coming from, and that the questions are sincere and come from a place of concern. And that is in what creates that bond with the client that goes way beyond. In fact, an interesting thing happened. I was having this conversation with my wife, and my advisor's name is Mike. And I asked her, I'm like, honey, if something were to happen to me, and she talks to Mike maybe once a year, not a whole lot, right? But I said, hey, if something were to happen to me, what's the probability that you would leave the MPM group, Mike, and go to another financial advisor? She goes, 0. And the reason I asked her that is the conference I was speaking at, someone was speaking to kind of females in investing and how 80% of them leave the primary advisor after a death or divorce. And I was like, wow, that's a high percentage. So I just thought I'd reach out and ask her that. And she's like, 0? Well, what have our advisors figured out is that touch, right? That meaningful personalization, those sincere questions, those phone calls of discovery, right? That's what drove that relationship. That's what's building that bond. I just love that she said that. She was that comfortable with them.
To position yourself as a subject matter expert while efficiently creating professional contrast in the eyes of your prospective clients, strategic partners, and ideal clients, deploy a podcasting initiative using the turnkey process developed by Proudmouth. Learn more at proudmouth.com. The best place to strengthen a client relationship is in the very place where you manage that relationship. BlueSquareToolkit.com has harnessed the best practices of Pareto systems and brought them to life in our easy-to-use system that is accessible on both your phone and your desktop. Simple technology to uncomplicate your life by creating clarity,
accountability, and consistency for your entire team. Build stronger client relationships by tracking and archiving essential information on what matters in your client's life, and make yourself indispensable and more referable in the process. Create a more consistent client experience and grow your business with the Blue Square Toolkit. Visit bluesquaretoolkit.com to get your 14-day free trial today.
I've never heard that quote or that stat of 80%. And it's interesting. I was just in Atlanta speaking at a conference with First Trust, and Jackie Wilkie was there. And as you know, I mean, she's got some great actionable insights. She was talking to me about the family phone call and the Ask Me Anything session, and just positioning everything as a service and a value added that's proactive, not waiting to react to a need that develops, but just getting out in front of evolving needs and uncovering unmet needs by being proactive. It was a very, very good presentation that she did. But, you know, it's interesting. Not long ago, an advisor, we had a consultation, and I could tell he was carrying a heavy load because there was long pauses and not a lot of enthusiasm in his voice. I just said, like, what's up? And, pause, you could hear him swallow. And he just said, I just had a client tell me something that was absolutely horrible. And he explained what was going on. And it was completely lost on him. So he tried to listen and respond, but he found himself lacking for how to respond. And, I think the scope of the information was significant, but his inability to respond really bothered him too. And I said, you need to know something. This is going to keep happening. As you get older, as your clients get older. And I said, first of all, it says they trust you, that they would tell you that. And to that degree. Okay, and fair enough. This actually adds to your fee worthiness. This actually makes you indispensable, to your point about, your wife and your advisor. But I would ask you to study this. Study the psychology of what it means to have a bedside manner, and develop a process so you're not grasping, you're not reaching, and you don't find yourself inadequate in how to respond when clients start to tell you what's keeping them up at night and what's causing them grief. And it's going to add impact to your business and your sense of purpose. And
having that process too, Duncan. If folks, probably this week, it's the week of Halloween, the Wall Street Journal this weekend had an interesting piece, and they were talking about AI and empathy, and will AI replace the financial advisor? And one of the things that they said that AI actually does better is empathy. Is that unbelievable? That AI would score higher on empathy, and they use this with doctors and physicians, right? And using AI virtual follow-up, and it scored higher than the actual doctor did on empathy. And if that's the case, then it must be, what does AI have that the person that is trying to be empathetic with the client doesn't have? Scripts. They know the tools. They have the processes to follow, and how to uncover and how to communicate that caring instead of trying to wing it. And so if someone were to put just a little bit of effort in knowing what are the questions to ask, how to ask them in ways, and in what kind of context and what kind of forum that it should be asked in, all of those things are not left to chance. And it was just interesting to me that AI scored higher on empathy than a human did. Empathy, we should own that, but we don't.
Wow, I that's counterintuitive, but totally. It's probably because a lot of people have trivialized the bedside manner. I remember you telling me way back when, and this went into the blue square method, that analogy you used about going to a doctor's office and how you can tell that they start thinking about you the moment they walk in the door and pull the clipboard off the back of the door. And you can see them getting caught up to their familiarity with your situation in real time in front of you instead of it outside the door. And then they stop thinking about you the moment they put the clipboard back and walk out the door and move on to their next interaction. So to your point, I mean, just thinking it through and making it a study. You know, I did a podcast a while back with Betsy Gueda, who wrote the book From Hurt to Hope. Very, very thoughtful lady. And just going through that book gives you some insights on having a mindset that enables you to have empathy. Because, I mean, obviously empathy is something that is innate, but to be able to structure it in a way and formulate it in a way where you can have an interaction with somebody and activate resonance, because the law of resonance says the value of your conversation begins when they hang up the phone or when they leave your office. And what are they thinking about an hour later, a day later, a week later? So, Chris, you know, it's interesting. In that conversation, I just shared my own personal frame that I use in my own life when I'm dealing with some adversity or in a conversation with somebody who trusts me and confides in me. And I'd like to think it kickstarted him on a journey to really focus on this gap that he had. But my own framework is just 3 words: faith, gratitude, effort. And, you know, what I said to him about faith was, you know, what is faith? Like, what is it? And, you know, the distinction between hope and trust, like I hope it's going to get better. I'm optimistic. I believe it's going to get better, but I trust that it will get better because I have faith. That led to a very, very interesting conversation. And I'm curious if you have any comments on that.
Last night, you've probably seen Les Mis, right? So,
oh yeah, oh my gosh, that's one of my favorite books of all times.
Unbelievable. And do you know in that one song, it's like in the service of others is where you see the face of God, right? And I think I witnessed that with that enlightened advisor, that they find that meaning, that there's a deeper meaning in serving others. You forget yourself in service, and you find meaning in giving back. You talk about the mentorship. I see it as the work that we do is in the service of helping others. And that is, to me, and just personally, my own faith, it's everything, right? Faith is the reason for being, right? I mean, that's everything is built on that. It's that building on a rock or sand. I think build on a solid core of a faith, whatever your belief is and whatever that higher power is, knowing that it's more than just you. You know, so many times too, there's a difference, you know, feeling like that we're indispensable. We might have put this, I think we put this in the Blue Square Method, but that quote about feeling that you're an indispensable advisor was that poem, if you'll indulge me. My dad shared this with me when I was younger, when I was a kid. And when I was getting a little cocky, I don't remember what it was. He had me memorize this poem. He said, take a bucket and fill it with water. He said, put your hand in up to the wrist. Now take it out, and the hole that's remaining is a measure of how much you'll be missed. He said, you can splash all you please when you enter. You can stir up the water galore, but stop, wait just a moment. Isn't it quite the same as before? And the moral of this quaint example is do the best that you can. and be a little wiser. But remember, there's no indispensable advisor. So how many people do you know in your own family tree from 3 generations ago? 3 generations back, can you name someone's name? Of anybody? 3 generations back. And so will our name be remembered 3 generations from now? Probabilities say no, it won't. And so leave as much of an impact on helping others that you can. And maybe one of theirs will be, I guess. But don't get too caught up in thinking that what we do is indispensable, but your caring for others can be.
The poem definitely made it in the book. And as well as that, my favorite quote by C.S. Lewis is, "You don't have a soul, you are a soul, you have a body." And if the soul is eternal, which I believe, then you're right. I mean, our purpose is, our reason for being is to get closer, as close as we can while we're here, which incidentally, in my view, is a perfect segue from faith to gratitude. Because I said to that advisor as we got into this, because he was really receptive. I think, again, he was receptive because it was so fresh. And he realized, okay, you know what, I have to be responsive here. But we got into gratitude. And I just said, tell me about your blessings. Tell me about your wins. Tell me about the things that have happened in your life that just stopped you in your tracks. You could feel the energy change. And he went through this list and he said things like, I'm making more money than I ever thought. But then he went into some of the qualitative stuff. Very, very interesting. And just that whole dynamic between God's will and free will, and just, again, the humility and taking nothing for granted and appreciating what we have as we aspire to what we want to attract and what we want to overcome and what we want to achieve. So faith, gratitude, and then effort. And I said to him, I said, when David raised his hand and said, "I'll take him on. I'll fight Goliath," I'm sure as he's walking up, he's praying his heart out. But then he realized, I still got to throw the rock. I have to throw the rock. I have to take action. I've got to do it. So then we had this incredible conversation about what matters and what can you control, what efforts can you take, especially in the spirit of being a serious student around things that you are now ready to work on. So faith, gratitude, effort, that's my own personal frame, and it landed with him, and I'm looking forward to sharing that with others. And again, to your point about demography, I mean, it's inevitable. Nothing stops this. People are going to open up more to the people they trust to help have a sense of belonging and belief that I'm in a safe harbor, I'm in good hands. And it adds, if nothing else, to your fee worthiness and your sense of purpose.
I think just captured it perfectly. I think that's a great set of rules to live by. You can't sit back and hope that it happens, but you got to recognize that there's a lot of other people, that played a role in you getting there, right? That's that confusion that you and I talk about a lot with our kids. One of the books, I don't know, did you ever have that author on that wrote Entitlemania?
Oh, yeah.
Did you get him on the podcast?
Okay, so since you told me about that, Entitlemania by Richard Watts, I think at every single presentation, I've said to a financial advisor, essential reading, non-optional. You have to get inside the head of first generation self-made affluence well in advance of that money going into the motion and making somebody suddenly affluent, the second generation. And so, yeah, I did have him on. It was a great podcast. He's a very thoughtful guy. But I will tell anybody who will listen that and a few other books and many of them are listed in the Blue Square Method actually in the back. It's been absolutely profound.
I just love that. The one thing that I remember, so often we remember books, and it really boils down to you'll remember a story. I mean, it's 300 pages, and you're like, oh, it's a great book, but you remember a sentence, right? I mean, you've read so many books. If I was to pull any of your favorite books, it's like you think about a couple sentences is all you really retain. And while I know I loved the whole book, I will just never forget that sentence that says, in our effort to give our children what we didn't have, we fail to give them what we did have. And those were the hard times that made all the difference, the difficulties, right? And so kind of getting into that mind of that first generation, and then also that second generation, their interpretation of that, well, it's such a great book because it's real. It's just case life examples. So I was thinking that on the effort side too, is just, don't fail to give them an opportunity to demonstrate their own effort and accomplishment, because you don't want to steal that away.
Well, interesting about that, a book that had a profound impact on me in terms of how it made me feel. So back to you were talking about the Sherpa, and I love telling people that the first person to have his picture taken on Mount Everest was Tenzing Norgay, right? The Sherpa for Sir Evan Hillary. And that whole metaphor about the Sherpa and getting to the summit, but that's not the goal. That's a goal. The goal is to get back down and survive the whole ordeal. But what's amazing is, as much as I love the Tenzing Norgay story, the book that actually hit me harder was written by his son, Jamling Norgay, talking about his dad. And galvanizing his dad's legacy and hearing it through the lens of the son of arguably a guy whose name will be talked about for hundreds of years. But that one got me more, and I'm a little older, sentimental, so that's essential reading too. Is reading Jamling Norgay's book, his tribute to his dad, Tenzing. So, Chris, I want to pivot here. I want to talk for a moment about innovation. So you were talking about AI. We have many advisors who, as part of their strategy and tactical meetings, especially virtually on Zoom, will add on the bolt-on called Read AI, which will capture the strategy and tactical meeting and then provide a very well-crafted output. And I'm not sure, who up in Skynet is putting this together, but it's pretty impressive.
Unbelievable.
So we would have advisors who would take an hour taking the talk to text or their notes to formulate a summary of a strategy and tactical meeting for the 20%. And clients would respond to it like, here's what we talked about, framed in form. Clients, they'd always respond to the email follow-up. Thank you very much. Love the meeting. Loved hearing about your new dog and all of that. But now it takes them 15 minutes with Read AI and that bolt-on. And all they have to do is vet it, polish it. Maybe if it triggers them to add in some other color, great reaction. So they have the gift of 45 minutes, but arguably an elevated experience. And we've talked about this before too, is finding that sweet spot between high tech and high touch. Technology is designed to liberate a financial professional to go deeper into what's proprietary. And that's the relationship. That's the practice. Those are the client experiences that are created. So I'd love to hear any thoughts that you have on that. And I also want to talk about testimonials too. Don't let me forget, but thoughts on innovation?
This is changing so fast. By the time some even watch this, it could be totally different. But just on that one tool alone, if you're doing 3 a day, 5 days a week, you're looking at 15 hours added back into your life. It's unbelievable. That's one tool. The other thing on the AI front, I was on it was a VC driven calls, really early stages on a company that is, I don't even know what I'm allowed to talk about on that because I think I had to sign an NDA. I'll just tell you this. What's coming down the pipe on the area of planning and portfolio allocation, discovery, gaps, risk tolerances and the like, wills, estates, modernizing and updating those in real time. I mean, it's unbelievable. And this is just scanning it in, pressing a button, and it's all done. What we have charged for historically is for that, for planning. And we've given advice away for free. I believe this flips over the next 18 months. I believe we will watch it right in front of our eyes, that people will say, oh, I can get all that, but that's not what I'm paying for. You see, the AI is as good as the prompt that it's given. And those super prompts now are 5,000 words long, some of them. One advisor said to me, what our team does is we provide answers to the questions our clients didn't know they should be asking. If you don't know the question to ask, the output is irrelevant. And so the advice side of things will continue to become stronger and stronger, I believe, and we will be paid for that side of things as well. But I do want to get to the testimonial side, because that has changed a ton, and not enough people have embraced that, for sure.
Well, and we don't need to get into the weeds on that, because we've done other stuff. I've had other interviews and webinars on the nuts and bolts of having that SEC ruling from a year ago. So November of 22, those early adopters, now that have had a year, I mean, everybody says game changer pretty loosely. This is the proverbial game changer. And what it's led for me is the validation for somebody to understand what it means when like, we're often touting that it's not what you say, it's what they hear. Okay, so what does that really mean? It means always speak as if it's through the lens of the client. Let people understand what your clients are saying. So why not let your clients tell your story? And here's what's interesting, again, a little bit of a progression, is the framework I use is perception, perspective, proportion. So perception, okay, so when advisors engage in marketing and branding, they talk about a value proposition, how to articulate value so they're perceived with professional contrast. But they often talk in terms of what they do. And we're saying, no. Talk in terms of what your clients want and how you get them there. That's the perspective. Give them the perspective of your clients. The example there, and I can't remember if I've even told you this, but I advisors who have clients that are hitting their milestones, liquidity events, they're retiring. Many advisors, and we talk about this in the advisor playbook, are hosting retirement parties for their clients. And one advisor who I had this conversation with, perception, perspective, proportion, he was at a retirement party, probably 50 people in the room, close family members, business associates, allies, and the advisor was invited. And the client, significant, grabs the microphone, and so he's got a huddle, and he's talking about how grateful he is, and he's very humble and understated. And then he points to the financial advisor and says, none of this happens without him. And the advisor's like, what? And everybody, he could feel it. Everybody looks at him, and he had been pumping hands throughout, the time leading up to that moment. He didn't have to say a word. And I said, the proportion of your value, did it validate for you how meaningful your value is? And what kind of impact do you think that had on everybody in his inner circle in that room? So that's something we're spending a lot of time on, is less on how you're perceived, more on the perspective of the client, and then the proportion of how that makes someone feel. Them, you, your team. I was just in Boston with a phenomenal team, very big fans and friends of First Trust, and they are poster boys for professional contrast, professional scarcity, and they are doing exceptionally well. And they've embraced this concept of relevance and impact to clients, and being creating a community with their clients. And it's fun. They say it's incredibly fun. It's rejuvenating, and clients rave about it. So, yeah.
I was just thinking on the perspective side, that goes to that one value question that we talk about. It could have been the advisor playbook where we were on your strategy and tactical meeting. You would ask the value question. I'm curious, what does our team do that you have found of most value? Thinking about the answers to that question over the years, it's all perspective. It's all about how you helped me get what it is that I wanted. And very, very little about their marketing and branding that they tried, to push on the people. It's interesting that perspective is the answer to the question of their perceived value, right?
Well, it's interesting because I know a financial advisor who we went through that. He did the next 90 days. He made his clients the voice. He went into it reluctantly, and it blew his mind. So that campaign is in the advisor playbook. You can also get that from First Trust from your wholesaler. But then it went into him talking as if there was another client in the room representing the advisor's value. That was his mindset. And so he would start a meeting with a prospective client, and now he says, right up front before we get into this, I'm really looking forward to having this conversation. I've got an agenda here and some questions I want to ask you, and I'm sure you've got some questions for me. But before I start, I just want to tell you what makes us different. And this stems from a question I've been asked many times over the years. And I've asked my clients what it is that makes us different. And this is what they tell us. It's our people, our practice, and our process. And then he goes into it. He talks about his people and how much they care and love what they do, and they're really good at it. And then he talks about, we work with business owners and professionals. They're very demanding around consistency. So we've adopted best practices. Then he talks about his process. Now we've developed and refined a process, puts all the pieces together. So that's what our clients tell us that make us different. And I'm curious if you have any questions or comments on that before we get into the formal part of the meeting. He says, absolute game changer in terms of just attracting, not chasing. But he said that little thing about saying, this is what our clients tell us.
Yeah.
It resonates.
Well, that's the whole reason why you look at any company that just explodes. It's that one little Facebook group of moms that make a comment and it just explodes. It's testimonials are what make that company what they are. It's what makes any comment on Twitter what it is. It is huge. There's white papers galore that describe why, but just knowing that it's that powerful. And it is thrown out there a lot that hey, this is new. This could impact. This really is one that is leaving people behind if they haven't embraced it.
Well, it's funny, when I travel with my wife anywhere in the world, she'll look at the reviews of the hotels we'll be staying at. And her mindset is, I want to find the worst review. I want to see, is this just sort of loaded with fluff, or is this real? So she'll scroll down and try to find the worst, because she wants the full spectrum. Okay. So yeah, I'm sure everyone loves it, but I want to hear. And she goes, if I can accept what this person's complaining about, then my expectations are set. That's just her mindset. But the whole premise is, it's like when you order up an Uber and you see anything less than 5 stars, you're like jarred. You're like, well, no way. I'll find somebody else. Reviews. But here's what it reminds me of, Chris, is right back to Maslow's hierarchy. At the core of human needs is belonging, a sense of belonging. And I think a financial professional just needs to remember the proportion of how significant it is, how noble this calling is, especially you've got second, third, fourth generation clients. I talked to a team last week, 4th generation clients up and down the family tree. And I said, just remember how unique and how significant that is as it relates to belonging. Am I going to be okay? Am I in good hands? Is this a safe harbor? Will you liberate me to go live my life and be the best version of myself? That's what a financial advisor's value creates. And so I hope a lot of what we've talked about here today just are gentle reminders around the significance of your value. And I'll let you have the last word. If anybody wants a copy of the Blue Square Method, just reach out to your First Trust wholesaler and they'll send you a link to the digital copy. You can read a chapter on the bluesquaremethod.com to get a sense for, the tone and some of the nuances and actions that we get into. But Chris, any closing comments?
I would just tell you it's November here right around the corner, and a lot will be spoken to around Thanksgiving and just a heart of gratitude. And so I would conclude with just a heart filled with gratitude for our friendship, Duncan, for our partnership with Pareto Systems, the incredible group that's behind the scenes at Pareto that just tirelessly gives to try to bring value to the advisor. It means a lot, and it's just in concert with what we at First Trust really feel and believe. And so a special thank you to you guys, and a heartfelt gratitude to every advisor that is consciously trying to improve and continue to bring additional value to their clients. I want to recognize everybody that does that, and thank you personally for your clients if they don't, but from our firms as well. So happy Thanksgiving, and thank you, Duncan, for having me on.
Well, very gracious, but I can't leave it at that, because I just have to just state from my heart how much appreciation I have for our relationship and our professional relationship with First Trust, because I've been around this block for a long time, and I've interacted with some of the most respected firms in the industry. And it's not even close how First Trust is the biggest advocate for the financial professional on planet Earth. And you know what, Chris? When I travel and I meet with advisors, to hear them tell me how much they appreciate their relationship with First Trust and how unique your firm is, you don't spend a dime trying to convince a client or trying to convince an advisor to do business in the form of advertising. There's no naming rights on stadiums. There's no ads in magazines or online. Every investment of effort just goes to strengthen the relationship with the financial professional. And that energy and goodwill is strengthening. And I think it will continue to. So right back at you. Thank you. We appreciate it. And we appreciate that you appreciate it. And I guess we'll shoot for what? Episode 75?
Let's do it, man. Appreciate you.
Okay. All right. You take it easy, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you for listening to Always On with Duncan MacPherson, where our objective is to enable professionals to always be working on their business and on themselves. Want to learn more about Duncan and his team? Visit ParetoSystems.com. Don't forget to click the follow button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the hosts and/or guests, and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Pareto Systems. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast is powered by Proudmouth, the Influence Accelerators. If you're like me and want to spend more time educating people and less time selling, Proudmouth helps turn Main Street experts like you into trusted mainstream authorities. They will help amplify your influence over a growing audience of magnetically attracted fans. Visit proudmouth.com to learn more.